Hello, everyone. We're about to get started with our legislative panel, but we have a video to share here first, and then we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, thank you for indulging us. We really like that video, and we like the opportunity to share it. So we had a great overview this morning of the federal issues that we're looking at, which are not, not small, as we're trying to deal with issues at both the federal and the state level. But thank you to Ed for giving us a great overview of where things stand in Washington at the moment. And then Elizabeth, thank you also for the discussion about the image of trucking. And I'm so happy to hear that that things are looking up for the trucking industry, and really people are beginning to appreciate what a large role we played in getting us through the pandemic over the past year. But now we're going to turn our attention back to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I am so pleased today to welcome all four chairmen of the General Assembly's transportation committees to participate with us today. Yesterday, we had a little preview of some of the issues that your committees are considering that affect the trucking industry. And today, we're happy to hear directly from these chairmen on those issues. And they've all generously offered to spend, the greater part of the next hour with us, which is fantastic. I think it's also important to note that by virtue of their positions, these gentlemen are all appointed to the Transportation Revenue Options Commission, or the TROC, by the governor, which was tasked with looking at various transportation funding options and making recommendations to the governor on those options. Unfortunately, Senate Transportation Committee Chairman Wayne Langerholc was unable to join us today because of a prior engagement. I know he very much wanted to speak to us, so he was gracious enough to provide a video for PMTA, which we're happy to play here in a moment to kick off the panel. Chairman Langerholc represents the 35th district in the PA Senate, which includes Cambria, Bedford, and parts of Clearfield County. Before his election to the Senate in 2016, he served as Cambria County Assistant District Attorney and was a Richland Township Supervisor. Senator Langerholc is chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. So Brendan, if you don't mind, please play Senator Langerholc's video for us, after which I'll introduce the other members of our panel.
Hello, I'm Senator Wayne Langerholc, the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. I wish I could have been there live in person for our annual conference. However, another scheduling conflict prohibited me from being there. But thank you for the opportunity to address your organization. I believe that there are other transportation chairs that are addressing you today as well, and I look forward to collaborating with them this session as well on the many challenges and opportunities that face our multimodal transportation system. I was first elected to the Pennsylvania Senate in November of 2016. I represent the 35th District, which includes Cambria, Bedford, and Clearfield counties. Prior to becoming a state senator, I dedicated my career to protecting families and seeking justice as the lead prosecutor as well as an assistant district attorney in Cambria County. I also served as a township supervisor for Richland Township, my hometown, and maintained a private law practice. My legislative district includes Interstate 80, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, US 219, and many rural roads. I understand the issues that your industry is facing, our interstates, major highways, and locally owned system. Remember, the interstate system is owned and managed by PennDOT. The federal government provides critical funding which is dependent on complying with a seamless system for commerce, adherence to strict environmental requirements, and enforcement of various federal and state motor carrier laws. I believe we can manage our assets better, which I will address in my remarks shortly. I first want to start by thanking the essential trucking industry for stepping up during COVID-19 and ensuring our shelves were stocked and home deliveries were made. This wasn't easy, and I thank you. From working long shifts to not knowing whether you could use the indoor restroom at your delivery site, I know it was tough, but you persevered for the betterment of this Commonwealth. I feel that the Wolf administration could have treated you better as well, and I know that my predecessor, Senator Kim Ward, who's now the majority leader of the Senate, fought tirelessly along with our caucus to ensure that our truckers had access to indoor facilities, clean restrooms, coffee, and food since the Wolf administration closed the rest areas for weeks. Now, speaking of the Wolf administration, I believe that there is the potential to work in a bipartisan way to ensure that we have a government that works better for you. As many of you know, I have been spearheading Senate Bill 382 to void PennDOT's bridge tolling initiative and to create a more transparent process for the governor and the General Assembly to review P3s with user fees. Early on into my chairmanship, I examined the P3 initiative and saw this as an issue that was going to be one that we needed to devote a significant amount of time and attention to. We did that, and I thank PMTA because they have been a close partner throughout this rigorous evaluation since the P3 board adopted or SDK. Secretary of Transportation alluded to how PennDOT could seemingly toll any major bridge on the interstate system, even beyond the 9 candidate bridges under scrutiny right now. This was not the intent of Act 88 of 2012. I would like to thank Rebecca Oyler, the Board of Directors, and your legislative team for standing beside me and my colleagues who will continue to fight for Senate Bill 382. 2020 was a tumultuous year, and PennDOT, the Turnpike Commission, transit agencies, airports, and local governments have been facing declining revenues to maintain the Keystone State's transportation system. There are fewer vehicles operating on our roadways. We know this. There are higher material costs and unfunded federal mandates. Plus, electric vehicles are starting to enter the fleet and will significantly alter how we fund and manage our transportation system. The governor established the Transportation Revenue Options Commission, referred to as TROC, to explore revenue options for all modes of transportation. Now, while I have called for a broader conversation on transportation funding ever since becoming the chairman in June, I'm not confident in PennDOT leading this charge. This risky P3 bridge tolling initiative, as well as the late call to borrow $600 million to fix a self-imposed cash flow issue, are recent examples of mismanagement at PennDOT. I know they even threatened to shut down all projects if we didn't act on their bonding request at the 11th hour. Finally, many of you may have seen the recent appropriations hearing in the Senate where PennDOT was present at the budget hearing. Hearing after hearing, we're still walking away with more questions than answers. To date, almost 5 to 6 months after the announcement of the P3 initiative, we still don't know answers to many simple questions regarding this tolling structure. I will continue to advocate against this P3 initiative, but doing so in a cost-effective manner, recognizing that there is definitely a need to have a broader conversation as to revenue within the transportation sector in our Commonwealth. Now, the General Assembly, myself, and the others that you have elected have a constitutional duty to provide a checks and balances on PennDOT's power and regulations. There is a reason that the members and the constituents of the 35th District sent me to Harrisburg. It is to advocate on their behalf and on behalf of their tax dollars. I feel PennDOT has a spending problem. However, I have a solution to provide reforms and investments without placing a further burden on the trucking industry. As I've said before, I'm not just going to stand up and grandstand against this P3 initiative and then walk away into my office and close the door and do nothing. Since becoming chairman, we have met with a multitude of stakeholders across the transportation spectrum. We have been developing a plan to address this revenue disparity and come up with solutions, and we are hopeful to do it in a bipartisan manner. I am very cognizant that all of you stepped up during Act 89 of 2013, as well as during COVID-19. You deserve a break, not another toll. The citizens and the hard-working citizens of this Commonwealth deserve a break, not just the answer that we are going to slap on another toll or a fee as a solution. I am confident and I hope that both sides of the aisle recognize the importance of Senate Bill 382, and I will continue to fight for its enactment. But, as I said before, I can't void a plan if I'm not willing to propose one as well. So, in the near future, I will be introducing a better vision than PennDOT's illegitimate and ill-conceived P3 bridge tolling scheme, and one that reaches far more comprehensively. My plan is called the Drive Smart Act, which will focus heavily on reforms as well as investments for the short and long-term stability of our transportation system. This act will be a collaborative and transparent effort to deliver real reforms and investments for vehicle efficiency in supporting motor carriers, airports, rails and trails, and transit agencies. The Drive Smart Act is supporting motor carriers by not imposing a higher tax on your industry. I also have Senate Bill 153, which authorizes electric-powered trucks to operate at 82,000 pounds, and it will be a component of the Drive Smart Act as well. I will be announcing the framework of the Drive Smart Act in the near future, which includes policy direction for reforms, investments, highway safety, multimodal transportation, and intergovernmental relations. I look forward to working with you to provide a better solution to fix the burdens on the Motor License Fund, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, transit agencies, airports, intercity passenger rail, trails, and other modes of transportation, rather than just a tacit approval to impose another tax, fee, or toll without legislative oversight. Rest assured that my office is always available to speak with you and to hear about your concerns. I will be looking forward for your ideas on how we can rein in PennDOT's power and ensure we have a short and long-term investment strategy that provides a safe and reliable network for you to work on. Thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Okay, thank you, Brandon, for playing that. All right, Senator John Sabatina represents the 5th Senate District of Pennsylvania, located in Philadelphia County. He is the Democratic chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. Chairman Sabatina also served as Assistant District Attorney prior to his election to the State House, where he served for 9 years, representing the 174th District. He was elected to the State Senate in 2015. Representative Tim Hennessey was elected to represent the residents of the 26th House District in Chester and Montgomery counties in 1993. Prior to his election, he served as attorney with the Public Defender's Office and also spent time in private practice. Chairman Hennessey is chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Representative Mike Carroll is the Democratic chairman of the House Transportation Committee. He was elected to the PA House in 2006 and represents the 18th District in Luzerne and Lackawanna counties. Prior to his election, he was chief of staff to then Representative John Udacek and was a liaison for transportation issues under Governor Casey. He also served as district office director for Congressman Paul Kanjorski. So thank you all so much for being here. We can debate the pros and cons of Zoom meetings all day, I think, but I'm really glad that it does seem to facilitate us all getting together like this. So I appreciate it. I'd like to start by giving each of you a few minutes to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your priorities this session for transportation. Let's start with Chairman Sabatina.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, everybody, for having us today. You know, it's a credit to the trucking industry. You know, that you have all four chairmen participating in this. We obviously think that the trucking industry is vital to Pennsylvania and to the nation. You know, you guys, you know, supply countless stores and with perishable goods for people. And, you know, we recognize how important the trucking industry is to Pennsylvania. A little bit about myself. I'm from Northeast Philadelphia. I was in the House for 9 years, often on the Transportation Committee. And I was on, when I came to the Senate, I had the opportunity to chair the Transportation Committee after being on it in the Senate. And, you know, it's been a great experience, a good learning experience. You know, and it's something that I'm really starting to get into and to you know, sink my teeth and to wrap my head around transportation issues. I just wanted to say a few words on Senator Langerholc's video. I like Senator Langerholc. He's actually someone I feel I can get along with and someone I can collaborate with. He's just taken the reins from Kim Ward as of this year. So there's going to be a couple growing pains associated with working with him. But, you know, I'm optimistic. I think he really does want to have a meaningful conversation about transportation. Nobody likes to raise tolls. Nobody likes to raise taxes. Nobody likes to pay them or charge their constituents more money. But the time has come for a conversation on transportation. It seems that we kick the can down the road a little too often sometimes in government. And you know, I think this P3 law, you know, is it perfect? No. But it's a way to start the conversation to meaningful transportation funding, because right now we don't have it. We have a lot of roads, a lot of bridges not being able to be repaired because we can't get the state police out of the motor license fund. So, you know, I welcome the opportunity to work with the trucking industry, with Chairman Carroll, Chairman Tim Hennessey, my good friend Tim Hennessey, and with Chairman Langerholc. You know, I think we all want to formulate a meaningful transportation plan, and the trucking industry obviously has a huge part and a huge say, you know, in this discussion. So that's where I am. I'm trying to, you know, my priority is to try and get this right. My priority is to try and fund transportation in a manner that's fair to all people of the state, you know, all corners of the state. You know, it's going to be a difficult task, I believe, because you know, because of the balance, what one part of the state may like, another part of the state may not. So it's going to take all of our efforts to come up with something that we can all agree to. With that, I will yield to back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Senator. Let's move over to the other side of the Capitol building with Representative Tim Hennessey, Chairman of the House Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning to everyone, including my co-chairs. I'm from the southeastern part of the state, as Rebecca had indicated earlier. I'm in my third year as chairman of the Transportation Committee. And in that capacity, let me thank all of you in the trucking industry for what you managed to accomplish last year in terms of dealing with the virus situation. I think all of us share our admiration for the way you worked and actually overworked in terms of getting Americans generally, and Pennsylvanians certainly in our case, supplied with the materials we needed to keep going through, especially through the earliest days of the pandemic. It has been a busy session last session, even with COVID-19. And this year it's been busy already, just trying to deal with the losses we've sustained to the motor license fund because travel has been down, not just personal car traffic, but a lot of truck traffic initially. If we can use the Pennsylvania Turnpike as an example, it seems like truck traffic has returned almost to pre-pandemic levels, but passenger car travel is still considerably short of where it had been. So that impacts the motor license fund because not enough gasoline is being sold to replenish that fund. John Sabatina mentioned the fact that the Pennsylvania State Police have taken in recent years, taken more money out of the motor license fund, or probably more correct to say that we have authorized more money to come from the motor license fund to go to the support of the state police. Historically, we've always taken money out of the motor license fund to support the state police, but never to the extent that we had gotten in the mid-teens, 2015, 2016, I think we were up to $800 million, 803 million, I think to be exact. It had been pretty much level about 500 million for a long period of time. And a study that was commissioned back in 2017 recommended 500 million or 515 million as an appropriate draw from the motor license fund. The legislature actually passed a statute back in 2017 to staircase the draw for the state police down to 500 million. And there are attempts now, and I think all of us are working toward getting that number of 500 million even less, so that there's more money for roads and bridges. The traditional money, traditional way to fund road and bridge repairs in the Commonwealth. So it's been a double whammy in terms of the motor license fund, the money coming out for the state police, and also the loss of income revenue because of the pandemic. We're trying to right that ship, and that'll take some conversations between the House and the Senate, and also just a reviving economy to get us back on track all across the nation. And then the elephant in the room becomes PennDOT's sort of surprise presentation of the Pathways project. I think a lot of you realize that in recent years, the interstate highway system, we're told, was ignored because PennDOT was spending more money on other state roads and bridges across the Commonwealth. They've emphasized last year that they were going to start directing more of that money toward the repairs that were needed, or they said were needed, for the interstate projects, interstate roadway system. And then sort of at the end of the year, they dropped this Pathways idea on the legislature, and without a whole lot of advance notice. They probably could have done a better job in terms of PR. But that being said, it's it seems to me it's a fairly well thought out proposal. We've had some pockets of resistance, of pushback from legislators, but frankly, not a whole lot so far. And I know they have a rather aggressive schedule. I think that their PennDOT's proposal for request for quotes is scheduled to be, well, right now it's the timetable is for June of 2021, which is, 15 days away, whatever. So we don't have a whole lot of time to deal with some of this stuff. We can probably delay PennDOT in terms of its proposed scheduling, but I think I'll be interested to hear what this proposal is from Senator Langerholc for the Drive Smart proposal, his initiative for that. I think we're open to that. We're open to anything we can, any ideas we can come up with, and that's what we're doing with the T-Rock meetings in terms of trying to come up with some ideas to tackle the various and very substantial and serious problems we have in terms of the condition of our roads and bridges. As our current law stands, the tolling is like the new revenue source, so long as we do it through in a P3 project. And just briefly, historically, P3s were authorized in 2013 in Act 88, 2012 rather, in Act 88. But then the federal government amended its law back in the end of 2015, which really gave the allowed Act 88 to move forward. So it's come at us rather quickly now, recently, and we're dealing with that. We're open, I think all of us are open to any kind of proposals that'll get us the revenue that'll allow us to fix our roads and bridges so we don't have any kind of weight restrictions put on bridges, a lot of diversions, a lot of problems that come with weight restricting bridges. We hope that doesn't happen. We certainly don't want to have any kind of catastrophe like happened in Minneapolis, 2007 or so. So we're open to any ideas that you guys can come up with. All of them cost money, and that's not a pleasant situation to be in, as John had alluded to. Nobody wants to take money from people. We just need to make sure that our roads and bridges system is a safe one. Again, thank you all for what you did to get us through the pandemic. We'll look for your help to get us through the next couple of months and years as we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hennessey. Now, Representative Mike Carroll, Democratic Chairman of the House Transportation Committee.
Thanks, Rebecca. As I listened to my fellow chairs, it dawned on me that the chairs are 3 lawyers and a guy from Scranton with a CDL. And and that's me. And I say that kiddingly because I have great respect for all 3 of my fellow chairs. And for the folks on this
and
call,
Mike probably has more contact with PennDOT and experience with PennDOT than the rest of us combined.
I live in a world of perpetual PennDOT, Tim. Yeah, I have a district in northeastern Pennsylvania that has more miles of interstate than I think any other PennDOT district in the state. It's a world of never-ending PennDOT for me. And like the others, I thank all of you for what you did, the men and women behind the wheel mostly, but everybody associated in the world of logistics and in the world of trucking that kept this country running during the past year or so. It is interesting. One of the other chairs mentioned that finally there was a spotlight shined on some folks that work anonymously and behind the scenes and in the shadows, and the importance of their role in our everyday living was highlighted, and the men and women in the trucking industry shared that same spotlight with nurses and frontline workers all over the place. So my thanks as well to all of you. I don't want to repeat what was said by all 3 chairs, and I know there's some. I want to leave time for questions. A couple things I would offer that. What we have going on now with the 3P and the tolling of the bridges is a product of failed policy that goes back in time mostly. The policy of raiding the motor license fund $800 million a year to fund the state police. For some context for everybody, that constitutes about 12 cents a gallon. So when you talk about 700 million, 500 million, 600 million, in terms of what the effect is on the motor license fund, that's a real bite out of the gas tax. And on top of that, you have money that goes to local governments. You have money that goes to the Montfayet Expressway. You have money that goes to the Department of Revenue and Agriculture. When you add all that together from the motor license fund, you're north of 20 cents a gallon. And if we simply didn't, divert those kinds of funds to entities not named PennDOT, we wouldn't have the struggle that we have with trying to raise the money that's being contemplated with tolling arrangement. Secondly, we've had an absent federal partner. I'm hopeful that whoever gave the presentation on the federal prospects with the transportation bill had some optimism in his or her remarks. The states, especially Pennsylvania, with the huge interstate network, really need help from the federal government with respect to funding, these interstates. They're really expensive to maintain, especially for a state like Pennsylvania with the huge number of miles that we have of interstate system. And complicating life for Pennsylvania and for PennDOT is you throw on to top of that these SRs, the 4-digit roads that we have more of them than almost every other state in the nation. And so PennDOT's responsibilities are gigantic. And the gas tax, admittedly second highest in the nation, is rated to support other non-transportation PennDOT related functions. And then, to pile on even more, we take the turnpike and we have them borrow $400 million a year and give that to transit because we don't have a sincere conversation on how to fund transit in this state. So we have to have an honest policy about the general fund and the responsibility of the general fund to provide financial support to the state police and to transit, and let the turnpike maintain the turnpike, and let PennDOT maintain our system, our interstate system, and our transportation network. What comes with the tolling, I'm not sure. I mean, I have a different perspective than probably some that have spoken. I was on the floor when House Bill 3 ran, and the 3P bill that became Act 88, it passed the Senate unanimously. It passed the House with 150 votes. I was a no vote and stood up on the floor and declared that this is going to give unelected folks the ability to toll roads and bridges in this state. It was prophetic, and I wish I was wrong, but that's what happened. And it happened mostly because PennDOT's been backed into a corner because the absence of federal support, the continued rating of the motor license fund, and the increasing cost to maintain this network, you put them in a position where they had no other choice. Like Representative Hennessey, I'm eager to see what Senator Langerholc has to offer, but it's going to have to be measured in hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever it is. And finally, I'll throw out there, because it was mentioned once, the Carroll and Representative Hennessey supported, thankfully, the electric vehicle registration bill that came out of the committee last week. Admittedly, it will generate a small amount of money for the motor license fund, but there will be more electric vehicles in the fleet going forward. And it's important that we get a fee structure in place now that they're treated in a way that's fair so that it supports the motor license fund. So Rebecca, I'll stop there, and this way you can get to your questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, of course, as you know, PMTA tracks transportation industry issues that impact the industries very, very closely. And thank you for having us as our organization come and testify recently about the P3 bridge tolling program. We were able to testify in both of your committees, and I really appreciate that. But let's just dive right in. I have a couple of questions here to toss around, and then hopefully, I know we have a couple of member questions that I've been emailed ahead of time, but I'd like to dive right in a little deeper into transportation funding. And all of you talked about what a big issue this is, and we have to come up with a solution. We all agree that there must be a solution to sustainable transportation funding for the future. But Pennsylvania currently has the third highest cost in the nation in which to operate a truck when you combine registration fees and fuel taxes. So this is affecting the ability of Pennsylvania's trucking companies to compete with those in other states. It also means that farmers, manufacturers, and consumers pay more to transport their goods at every point of the supply chain that passes through Pennsylvania. And I know Chairman Hennessey mentioned the importance of reviving the economy to get part of the solution for making sure that their license fund is funded. Trucking is a big part of that. So as we debate transportation funding, there are still a lot of people out there who say that trucks should pay more. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe I'll start with Chairman Hennessy since I mentioned him here.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Quite frankly, I don't know that anybody's really studied it. Maybe you guys have studied it, certainly more than the legislature has studied it in terms of whether or not the trucking industry is paying its fair share. Frankly, my thoughts, without looking at any studies, would simply be that generally, if it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't try to fix it. I don't know that there's any kind of. I've not heard of any impetus or initiative to try to raise any kind of fees on the trucking industry. We know you compete with, given our position as the Keystone State, we compete with a lot of other states in terms of what fees your trucks might be paying, and frankly where they're based. And what I've always learned when you sit there and think you want to fix this, we're going to come up and we're going to make things better, and you look around and you see what the system is, and you realize how well the system has been put in place already, so that the tinkering we do with it is really around the edges. It's not a wholesale type of rewrite of our funding streams. As I said, I don't know of any initiatives that have been offered so far in terms of just anybody thinking about raising fees on the trucking industry. That's probably the last thing we want to do right now, especially since we've all been lavish with our praise of the trucking industry, just getting us through the problems that we've had in the last 15 months.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Sabatina or Carroll, do you have anything to add there?
Well, the only thing I would say is that it wouldn't be, there's no effort, I don't think, at least from my perspective, to single out the trucking industry with respect to transportation funding. I don't know how you'd insulate the trucking industry from any kind of conversation that is either on the horizon or even the tolling of the bridges. I'm not sure how, to be sincere, I don't know how we would insulate the trucking industry from any negative effect if there's going to be an effort to try and raise some number of hundreds of millions of dollars for the motor license fund. A solid first step that would insulate the trucking industry would be to stop taking the $700 million out of the motor license fund for the state police. That insulates everybody. That insulates passenger car drivers and trucks and everything in between. So that'd be a solid first step. Admittedly, it does generate and put pressure on the general fund, but it seems to me that that pressure is warranted there, no different than the turnpike arrangement.
I would agree with both Mike and Tim. Nobody wants to single out any particular industry to fund the transportation problem. It wouldn't be fair. And especially, we recognize how important the trucking industry is, where the last thing we want to do is try and break the backs of the trucking industry. But as Representative Carroll just alluded to, is I don't believe PennDOT cares where they get the money from. They just need the money. So it's, I believe it's, and I don't want to speak for anybody, so I won't say that. It's my belief that the rest of the chairs and I can, work with Representative Langerholc. I'm not privy to his plan or his bill yet as of yet. So I'm interested to hear what he has to say. But yeah, I think if we get PennDOT the money they need, who knows what's on and off the table, I guess I'll put it that way.
I can just
to
add,
follow up on that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it would be helpful. As of last Wednesday, we had not, the states had not heard from the federal government in terms of what they call guidance about how we can spend whatever monies are in ARP. I was led to believe early on, right after the president signed it back in the early part of March, that most of the money, if not all of the money, devoted to transportation in the ARP. The American Rescue Plan was devoted toward mass transit. And that's a good shot in the arm for mass transit, but it doesn't help us generally with our, and help PennDOT with the roads and bridges. And we don't know what's coming in terms of the infrastructure bill, like Mike alluded to. We need an infrastructure bill out of the feds, and they keep promising it, but when I talk to people in the industry, they say, well, judging with the way Congress works, it may be the fall till we get a federal infrastructure bill. Whatever monies are in there, we can take a look at those and hopefully accelerate the drawdown that the state police have, accelerate the removal of the state police, or at least to the extent that they have been, so that should help. But we just need that information. And I think Mike had asked whether or not anybody know from the earlier presentation today what the feds have in mind for us, because it's very difficult to try to figure out how we're going to move in the state when we don't know what kind of money might be coming to us from the feds and what restrictions it would have on it. Hopefully,
I don't think we have
this morning.
Yeah, I don't think we have the details. We're all waiting to hear what comes out of those discussions in Washington. But I want to follow back on something that Senator Sabatina talked about, waiting to work with Senator Langerholc on his bill. As we're talking about funding solutions, do you think there are solutions that we're discussing that have bipartisan support at this point? I know, we've talked a lot about diversions. Is that one area that has bipartisan support? And then how much of the solution does depend on Washington, like Representative Hennessey mentioned? Senator Sabatina, do you have any thoughts there?
Sure. We are waiting for word from Washington. Myself, I'm anxious to hear, there's a possibility that for at least a year or a budget cycle, maybe 2 budget cycles, that we can use some of the money for public safety, thereby perhaps taking the state police out of the motor license fund for at least a year or 2. After that, the money runs out and we're back into the same predicament that we have been. But that's my hope. I don't have confirmation that that's what we can spend the money on just yet. But that's an idea that I had over this past week. And Rebecca, what was your other question?
Bipartisan support. Is there anything else that we can agree on that has bipartisan support?
That's a good question. I guess the devil's in the details. It's bipartisan support. Like I say, and everybody says, transportation isn't a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. It's a Pennsylvania way of life thing. So the question is how to pay for it. So I don't know that there's necessarily a Republican or a Democratic way to come up with the money. So I long story short, I guess it depends on what it looks like as to whether or not we'll receive bipartisan support. It may be, some of the differences may not be bipartisan. Some of the differences may be localized. Different sectors of the state of Pennsylvania may have different ideas and different losses or benefits depending on how you raise the money. Is that
okay?
Is that? I hope. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fair.
If that wasn't clear. Yeah.
No, completely understand.
For
that's
instance,
fair.
a lot of sections of the state don't value mass transit. Me being in Philadelphia, there's a certain value I have for mass transit that some of my companions from Pike County or Somerset County may not share the same importance as I do in that matter.
Sure. Well, when you talk about the sort of local issues, as you know, PMTA's members oppose the P3 bridge tolling project because those 9 bridges, those areas around those bridges will be affected, disproportionately. But it also places a disproportionate burden on trucks that can't pass on the cost of those tolls to their customers. So Chairman Carroll, I noticed at a recent hearing, you said, if not bridge tolling, then what? I know you mentioned diversions. We've talked a lot about diversions being a big part of the problem, but do you think if a more equitable funding solution is found that PennDOT will abandon the bridge tolling proposal?
If it approximates what the bridge tolling proposal does, I'm sure PennDOT would consider that. That's measured in the $2 billion range. I mean, that's real money. When it comes to transportation funding, there's a lot of folks that say we have to do this, but when it comes time to actually round up yes votes, that's really hard. I mean, I've been doing this since 2006, and Chair Hennessey and Senator Sabatina, same thing, a long time. It's hard to put up votes for revenue for the motor license fund, and the effort to get to Act 89 was measured in years. And it seems to me that the 3P proposal that was enacted as Act 88 in 2012 was the General Assembly's effort to try and farm out that responsibility to this P3 board, because I think the intent of that legislation was to have another way to generate revenue without having to round up yes votes in the House and Senate. And so what we have today is a product of that legislative proposal that became Act 88. If there's a desire within the General Assembly to not raid the motor license fund and to have a fair arrangement with respect to the registration and driver license fees or gasoline taxes, whatever, I'm eager to see it and hear it. I'm eager to see what Senator Langerholc has to say. And if there's a way to avoid the tolling of the bridges, I don't think PennDOT's married to tolling bridges if there's a better way. I'd like to see what that other way is.
And if I can just jump
Thank
in,
you.
I don't think that PennDOT
Sure.
is going to walk away from the idea of tolling. Something we put in the law 7-8 years ago. They've become aware of it. I don't know what took them so long, but maybe just the pressures that they were facing in terms of financial revenue shortfalls that made them look around. But I think tolling is probably going to be in the future because not just for bridges, but perhaps for generating funds for highway repairs, totally away from and unrelated to the bridges and the approaches to bridges. If I was the trucking industry, I wouldn't necessarily think, be hoping that all tolling is going to be shelved and put aside and forgotten, because I just think that would be an unrealistic approach. I think PennDOT would probably be willing to talk if we could come up with other revenue sources to try to scale back the tolling and guarantee that it would stay at low rates for a fairly significant period of time. And that might be one way to address the issue and merge it with other federal monies. But again, the question is, is there any way to judge what would gain a majority of votes in the House or the Senate? And without knowing what the numbers are, you can't even begin to try to corral those votes, and count the numbers and make sure you get to majorities in both houses.
Rebecca, I think when I either before the hearing or before my appearance on the cable show in Harrisburg, I did a quick search of tolling proposals around the country, and it seems to me, and I don't recall the states exactly, a few come to mind: Louisiana and Ohio and Indiana, Wyoming. There's a focus on tolling now among the states, and it mostly traces back to the lack of a federal partner with maintenance of these federal, interstate systems. So when you hear states like Wyoming and Indiana and Ohio and Louisiana talking about tolling, I think the common denominator is the lack of a federal partner with respect to these, major, hundreds of millions of dollar bridge replacements. I mean, these are no small ticket items. They're in some cases of over $1 billion. I think there was a bridge over the Ohio River between Indiana and Ohio and Kentucky, or Indiana and Kentucky. I don't recall which, but a major bridge that the states are struggling because they don't have the capacity to do it, and the federal partner is absent.
That's a really good point, and I think that does come back to we really need to have faith, and our friends in Washington D.C. are going to step up and become a better partner in that regard.
As I think I saw that your sister organizations in the other states, we're doing exactly what you're doing and saying, well, wait a minute, why all this tolling? This is going to really be harmful for the trucking industry. What's happening in Pennsylvania with PennDOT is not a one-off. It's happening in all over the country.
Right, and I think the federal fuel tax was raised. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
It's Mark Dufresne. No, I appreciate those comments, and it is frustrating to see that lack of partnership from a federal perspective. I do want to point out that those new bridges across the Ohio River, 2 of them in Indiana and Kentucky, are new bridges. That is new infrastructure, and obviously that type of infrastructure, they did both cost over $1 billion. We're willing to pay for that new infrastructure, but what we're looking at in Pennsylvania is not new bridges, new efficiency, new pathways. We're looking at the same roads that are there, just being added an additional toll onto that. So we've always said we're willing to pay for infrastructure, but if you create a new freight lane and I have to pay a toll to use that's terrific. You build a new bridge, 2 new bridges, and it creates new pathways and reduces congestion. That's worthwhile. But what we're looking at right now is just tolling the existing roads that have been there for almost 100 years.
They're deteriorating, and I don't know to what extent. I don't want to be alarmist and saying that catastrophic is going to happen, but they are telling us, their engineers at PennDOT are saying that some of these bridges, if we don't act, will have to be weight restricted, which will cause a lot of disruptions in the diversions that I think Rebecca's been talking about.
Chairman Hennessey, Senator Langerholc mentioned his bill, Senate Bill 382, which would provide, I think, some necessary transparency in that P3 process, which I think we stated earlier wasn't perfect, and require that P3 projects with user fees have to go through the legislature. Is your committee going to be taking up Senate Bill 382 sometime soon?
Not as it stands. I mean, if there's going to be an initiative, what you call it, the Drive Smart initiative, we'll take a look at that. But just the idea of putting the brakes on a project that PennDOT's obviously invested a lot of time and effort in and man hours to try to think it outside the box and create a new system of approaching these bridge repairs, which everybody agrees, seems to me, are necessary to some extent or another. Just putting the brakes on that, Senate Bill 382 would put the brakes on that, but without this new initiative that we haven't seen yet, the new proposal, what is it? Are we just going to stop pathways in its tracks? I think we can slow it down. I think that we can take some steps to think it out publicly, but I don't know that necessarily we're going to move a bill that stops it in its tracks when we don't have any idea what the alternative is.
And one last thing I'd add, Rebecca, is I'm not sure that the administration is embracing the Senate bill either. So even if the House were to run it, it likely doesn't stand in good shape when it comes to the governor's signature. And I think that the smarter thing to do is to have a more global conversation about what can we do about PennDOT's funding needs as part of the budget discussion and any other transportation bills that could run in June, and not just run a bill that says what you cannot do.
Okay, we just have a couple of minutes here. So I want to shift gears a little bit and bring up a question that one of our members sent to us, having to do with workforce. So shifting gears, the recent shutdown of the Colonial Pipeline brought to the forefront the real crisis in workforce in the trucking industry. Our industry is always one of the first to step up when we have an emergency, but in this case, we've been limited in our ability to help because we can't find enough drivers to drive tanker trucks. The workforce crisis isn't new, and we're not the only industry that's suffering. But what steps do you think should be taken to make sure that we have enough people willing to step into good paying jobs in the trucking industry? Anybody want to take that?
Well, there is a proposal from Representative Cox, Jim Cox from Labor and Industry, to bring back the work search requirement in order to continue to receive unemployment benefits going forward. We've always had that work search requirement to some extent. Some administrations enforced it more than others, I think, but it's always been the idea that you've got to show that you're actually out there trying to be part of the workforce if you're going to rely on unemployment. The federal add-on, this the $600, now I think it's down to $300 a week in terms of adding on to the general Pennsylvania unemployment benefit, really has had, at least we're hearing, it's had a depressing effect in terms of getting people to want to come back to work. If you're getting, unless you're going to get paid that extra $300 to come back to work, people seem to say, well, why don't I just stay at home and collect the money? And that's really, sort of I don't say anti-American, but it's certainly anti-initiative. It's like we want to have people who desire to work, and it provides dignity to a parent to be able to provide for the family. We don't want people sitting around, but the good intentions frequently go awry, and that's what I think happened to some extent with the federal addition to the unemployment benefit. It's really makes people just have to measure whether or not it makes sense to go to work and give up the extra boost that they get from over and above the unemployment comp benefit. So getting the work search requirement back probably will be the boost that we need to get people back into the workforce.
Great, thank you. Chairman Sabatina or Chairman Carroll, do you support Representative Cox's proposals on the unemployment provisions?
I think it's something I would support. I know that we have a problem with trying to have employers fill jobs. And so, without knowing what the final version of the bill would be, I'll offer a mild support for it, Rebecca. The other thing I'd offer when it comes to filling these kinds of jobs is that we have to do a better job of making sure that high school graduates know that there are opportunities for careers that don't require you going to Bloomsburg to get a degree in political science. And, if we had a little bit more robust effort to try and direct some high school seniors to career and technical schools that include getting a CDL with a hazmat endorsement, there are careers there that are that not just respectable, but financially stable for a family. So we as a society and as policymakers should do a better job of making sure that graduating high school seniors know that there are other options besides, off to I don't want to pick on Bloomsburg, but off to a four-year university to get a degree in history.
Absolutely agree with you there, Representative. Anything to close us out? We're out of time here. Senator Sabatina, anything to add?
I just want to say that, this is I'm glad we did this today. This is, like I said, that this conversation had to begin. We've been putting it on the back burner for far too long. So the conversation for meaningful transportation funding had to begin. I believe the tolling, the P3 legislation is part of the conversation. I don't know that it's final. I believe, and just from hearing Senator Langerholc speak, I believe that the P3 legislation is going to be part of the overall conversation. to fund transportation. So I don't know that it's as done a deal as some of my companions may think.
So it's part of the bigger conversation. Great. Well, I thank you so much. I don't want to keep you gentlemen any longer than we need to today, but I really appreciate you joining us. And it's clear that we have a long conversation ahead of us. So we are happy to work with you however we can as we work through this here in the future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for your leadership, Rebecca,
Thank
and your wonderful advocacy for your industry with the House and Senate members. I think I can speak for all four of us that you do a great job on behalf of the folks you represent in Harrisburg. So thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We all agree. Thank you. Good
Thanks
day,
very
everyone.
much.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
Yes, thank you.